Hey, Jess, it's good to see you, and thanks for carving out the time to chat with me.
Great to see you. Great to be here.
And for the folks that are going to be listening to this, I just want to share a little bit of background on Jess. She built her first six-figure business while still in middle school. That's pretty damn impressive. Among the companies that she founded are In Dinero, a fintech company that helps businesses manage their accounting and taxes. In addition to that, she's founder of Astonishing Labs, a startup innovating biotech solutions that aim to transform human health. And a stealth litigation marketplace has launched tens of millions of dollars in litigation. It's interesting. And then Mawe, if I'm pronouncing that correct, is a venture builder, is her latest undertaking with an existing portfolio of companies that are attracting a lot of capital and establishing a lot of progress and momentum from those in Silicon Valley. In terms of background, she has a computer science degree from Berkeley. She went through the ringer of YC, so she's a YC alum. And at one point, you were even featured on the cover of Inc. magazine. So there's no shortage of experience and pedigree here, which is why I'm excited to chat with you about your experiences in building and running companies and how you managed yourself and your well-being along the way. So anyhow, thank you again for carving out the time. And if it's cool with you, I'm going to jump into the first question based on something that you wrote on LinkedIn. I read that you said that talked about the difficult early days of In Dinero and how at one point you had to let go of, I think, everyone in the company, shut down the office space, borrow money from the parents. Like, this is the classic legendary story of really being cockroach, right? And surviving and doing whatever it takes. Like, the question I have around this is, how do you know when to call it quits? When is enough enough? And what is the difference in your mind between this sort of macro pivot and a micro pivot?
I have had to lay off people probably 3 times at Dinero. It's been pretty excruciating. We've had near-death experiences at least 3 times, probably more. And I've probably spent 4 years of my Dinero tenure out of the 10 I was there thinking about how it was just grueling, hard. Is this going to make it? So I'm no stranger to living in perpetual fear and doubt and uncertainty and scarcity. And what I learned through that process is you really only have 2 options. One option is you're going to be there, and one option is you're going to shut it down and leave. But if you're going to be there, you got to, or at least in my case, I believe that I had to be 100% all in, and I'm going to make this work. I am determined. I'm going to figure this out, come hell or high water, and we're going to end with a great outcome. Company's going to be profitable, make tons of money. We're not going to be like all those other stupid venture companies that just burn lots of VC money. So I kind of had to make this narrative in my head. By the way, this is with us making no revenue. Okay. We have no customers. We have lots of users who pay us nothing, and we're still burning money. Okay. And in my head, I'm like, Jess, we're going to figure this out. This is going to happen. And just committing to that as an outcome and saying, I'm only quitting when I'm pulled out of my office, or I guess in that case, living room, because we got rid of the office because we had no money anymore. And so I was just very committed to seeing it through. And if it wasn't going to be the idea I had for Dinero, which is help companies with their finances, accounting, taxes, and do so in a software-enabled way, because accountants are terrible and annoying and hard to work with. That's the idea. And I'm like, this is an obvious idea with an obvious need, and people, there's no reason why this shouldn't be a great business. There's absolutely no excuse. The only excuse is because I'm a terrible entrepreneur, or because I gave up. More likely because I gave up. So that was the logic I had, and that's why I stuck with it. And that's why I knew I would do it, and eventually got there. And so when I left the company, 250 employees, profitable, valuation in the hundreds of millions of dollars, brought in a new CEO. I still own most of the company. So I felt satisfied with where I left it and ready to try something else. So, but obviously you can talk about this beforehand, but when you rattled off the things I'd done, I'm thinking to myself, man, I wish I'd done more. I still have that in me. And I think that a lot of people I know who built companies have that chip on their shoulder no matter what. Like, I'm thinking, all right, cool. I was on the cover of Inc. magazine. Whoop-de-doo. I have a ton of friends who were on the cover of Forbes magazine. Why wasn't I there? Right? Like, there's always more, but then that's the trap, right? And so leaving the job was really hard for me because I loved the ego satisfaction of saying, I'm a CEO, I run a company. And now I don't run a company. And so it's really interesting to like play with my identity. Like, who am I? Who is Jess as just a friend? Jess as a person in the world who isn't also a entrepreneur. Well, I guess I am an entrepreneur, but I'm not a CEO. I'm not running a company anymore. But I'm so happy about it now. Now I realize there's no glory in running a company.
It's extremely stressful.
Yeah. But some people love it.
Right. Yeah. Some do. And I think that's an interesting question to your point about like, there was that passion, I got to imagine that even though things were difficult, you saw the opportunity, there was a passion for the problem, and you couldn't imagine doing something else at the time. I see this with a lot of entrepreneurs is that one of the most important decisions as it relates to managing their own well-being, being able to stay in a positive headspace despite building a company being incredibly difficult, is that they picked the right thing. Like, they didn't rush into sort of, let me go and just build this startup because that's what all the cool people do. Like, you got to build something that you're willing to stick with, because like I said, it's going to suck no matter what. But if you have the passion for it and you find a way to make it fun, at least you can somehow get through it. Were there things that you did to sort of, keep your head straight along the way? Just whether it was therapy or coaching or exercise. I know that you had written about how you and a co-founder went to sort of couples counseling, and it helped you understand the psychology of your co-founder, and sort of the two of you worked on that together. And then having that understanding of why people are wired the way they are just helps you move through these difficult decisions more easily together. Can you talk a bit more about that experience?
Sure. I think that couples counseling is really just a way to work on your own problems in a different container. So a lot of people go to couples counseling thinking, oh, this is great. The therapist is going to yell at the other person for me and give them negative feedback. That's not actually how it works. It's more about how can I show up better for my partner, and what can I do? What role can I play here? Like, what would make you feel better, Andy? Like, how can I make you feel more loved and cared for and like fulfilled at work? And vice versa. And I think that mental shift is probably the most valuable thing I got out of the group counseling. Also, that was my Inc. magazine cover story. Like, they loved that and they wrote about it. And so when I heard that they were going to write about it, I'm like, Andy, we got to do more couples counseling just to like make the story even juicier. But it was also helpful. Don't get me wrong. As far as like other things I did to stay sane, I'd say halfway through my founder journey, I really prioritized having lots of fun. Like, I went on so many fun trips, gone to Burning Man, and I've been going, the past 70 years. I joined YPO, which is Young Presidents Organization. It's essentially Alcoholics Anonymous for CEOs. And they organized a ton of trips and outings. So I was just living my best life because I thought, you know what, YOLO, if this startup doesn't work out, I don't want to waste my entire decade just suffering and in pain. And if you actually, I've got this book I read through, which I highly recommend. So The Happiness Advantage talks about how a lot of society has taught us to think that happiness comes after success, when actually it's the inverse. By being happy, you're more likely to create success. Why is that? Well, part of it is your brain. Like, you're more creative. You actually do better work when you're happy. But I think part of it's energetic. Like, if you're happy and you're lively, then you attract better talent to want to work with you. And people are more motivated to want to do things for you. And investors are more likely to want to throw money at you. And reporters are more likely to want to talk about you. Like, it's a whole, and then the success leads to more success, which reinforces the happiness. But how do you get there? You have to trick your way into getting happy as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. And so I was always trying to think about hacks for happiness. Like, okay, what will make me super happy so I could show up? Like, what is that guilty pleasure that I'm going to feel super guilty about? But I want to do it anyway because it's going to make me happy so I show up better at work. And my big thing was going to Hawaii. I always felt terrible about going to Hawaii because Hawaii's my happy place. And, you're on a Zoom call and you say, yeah, what's up? Where are you at today? And they're like, oh, I'm in, middle of nowhere and it's terrible. How about you? Like, oh, I'm in Hawaii. I'm like, going to the beach today and I'm like going to go surfing today and it's awesome. And like, everything's just better. And so anyway, long way of saying I'm still uncomfortable sometimes with doing those hacks, but I still do it anyway because I know it's going to make me better at work. I mean, today I told you I flew my plane all the way to Florida just for a day and I hung out with my dog on the beach because I knew it'd make me happy. And, hopefully it helps me with work. And if not, at least I had a fun time.
Well, yeah, and I saw an interview with Paul Graham of YC fame where somebody asked him the same question. It was like, what's the job of the CEO? And his answer, which I loved it, was find a way to be happy and have fun. Like, have fun. That's the job of the CEO because it's going to be terrible. So what is the point of like doing a really hard job if you're going to approach it in a way that's just going to lead to burnout and you don't find a way to enjoy it, which will give you the ability to endure it? Yeah, there's a bunch of one of the takeaways I get from this is like, I'll see the chatter on Twitter from VCs talking about, oh, it's a red flag if you see a founder at, Burning Man or whatever it is, or founders posting photos of them having a good time because shouldn't they be working nonstop like I am as a VC? And it's bullshit, complete garbage.
It's like, all right, I don't want to take money from those people if that's their attitude. Like, bye. Like, go suffer if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I don't know. And even in my career, I don't know of any successful founders who found success through strictly through a diet of suffering and punishing themselves. And one founder I spoke to not too long ago, I had met with him. He was trying to bring me on board when he was building his company. It was in a really popular space and they're growing really quickly. And I remember him saying is like, I'm going to only sleep 5 hours a night. I have a really specific schedule and set discipline that maximizes the number of hours I'm working and so on and so forth. And, I didn't join the company, but then 2-3 years later, I caught up with him and the company unfortunately didn't work out. And he said, yeah, that was ridiculous. That was just stupid. That was the dumbest thing I could have possibly done.
I hear about this all the time, by the way. I've heard this from former unicorns, by the way. Like companies that used to be valued over $1 billion. Founder was obsessed, worked all the time, barely slept, shunned fun and shunned joy. And, a lot of those companies ended up like losing their unicorn status. And they were media darlings. These are people on the front page of magazines. And because they approached it from that lens, like things didn't go as well. And that's like really sad. But I talk to those founders a lot. A lot of them are my friends. And then now they've seen the light. It's just a little late from a career perspective and they got to recalibrate. But we'll all learn that lesson when we're meant to learn that lesson, I guess.
Yeah. It happens usually once we face plant and we hit the ground and then we realize like, wait, something's got to change.
So before I had to do my first round of layoffs at Infinera, my co-founder Andy and I, we were pretty upset. Obviously, we're like, all right, like we had all this media, raised all this money, and now our company's like terrible. So what we did was every day we played video games, watched TV, played golf. Like we just optimized for like fun, and it looked like we weren't working at all. But it was in that space that I just like kind of put my head down and was able to figure out how to pivot in an era into doing what it does today. And if I was just like grueling, grinding away, I don't think that would have happened.
Yeah. No, it's through the act of play where we disconnect the sort of busy monkey mind. And through play, when we can then be present and just enjoying what we're doing, and then that constant internal chatter then shuts down, that's when creative decision making and creativity comes through us from a different place. It doesn't come from the exhausted intellectual mind. It comes from the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, I mean the fun was forced on me. I'll admit, I definitely was never wired that way naturally. And then of course I lost my way eventually. I went back to work, and then business started to take off, and then I was just like grinding. And so I think there's a cycle here, and where each time it gets better, but it's the faceplant moments, you're right, that lead to rediscovering the importance of playfulness and fun for productivity.
And just to sort of switch gears a little bit, one thing I'm really interested in chatting with you about is I saw that you wrote that one of the things that really changed you as a leader was an ayahuasca experience. And just as a disclaimer, because I'm going to put this, it's not for everyone. It's not something to be taken lightly. Make your own decisions, not to mention it's not legal in the United States. So if you're going to do it, go elsewhere. Like all the necessary disclaimers. I'm just going to put that out there. I'm curious to unpack that a little bit more and how that experience played a role in you as a bit of a changed leader as an entrepreneur.
I did ayahuasca during COVID. It's been a few years. I did it in Costa Rica, and I came in just feeling like my relationship to myself as a CEO was really stressful. I was really struggling with it. I felt unhappy at work. I felt like I didn't show up with confidence. I didn't show up with any fun. It was all business. It was all so serious. And doing plant medicine helped me realize that I want to come to work feeling a sense of love for people I work with, that I genuinely care about everyone I work with, that I'm here on a almost spiritual journey to help each person fully realize their potential on Earth, and vice versa. We're all here to support each other. They're helping me, I'm helping them, we're all helping each other. And it should feel like just so much love and not like a transaction where you're working here, I pay you a salary, you're accountable to goals. And I'm really happy that I had that feeling and realization, because after that I journaled about it. I'm like, okay, how do I get from my current reality to what I'm looking to manifest? And it took time. Like I had to replenish and rebuild my executive team. I had to just, for each new person I brought on, to state, here is my goal. Like, obviously, if the business works out, that'd be great. But the goal here is we're here to support and love each other and have a fun time and make this feel like an awesome experience where we're all growing as human beings. And so what are your personal goals for like how you want to evolve as a person? Like asking those questions in an interview process sets the stage. And so it's hard to shift gears if someone comes in expecting and wanting a transactional relationship at work. So I did have to overhaul my entire team and start from scratch and find people who wanted to be on that journey with me. And now I'm really happy to say I work with a bunch of CEOs who I really love working with, who are just awesome. and where I'm just committed to their success in and out of work. And the plant medicine got me there. I don't think I would have gotten there on my own. I think for people who haven't done plant medicine before, who are curious, on one hand, you could think, okay, I'll just take some Molly at a festival, right? And just party. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about hiring a professional facilitator or shaman or, guide, whatever you want to call it, who will help you set clear intentions up front for what you're looking to change in your life. What are problems that are in your life that you're struggling with? Such as, I don't love my work. That might be, my intention is to love my work. It's clearly stating these out, working with the facilitator ahead of time, having the journey, writing down all your learnings and discoveries and things immediately after the experience, and then working with them and your business coach and your therapist and your community, all your loved ones. Hey, here are the notes I wrote down. Here are the actionable things I want to change with my life. And having that group accountability and support, that's called good integration. I think that's really important if you're going to have success from plant medicine. But yeah, ayahuasca is super intense. Like, I was just puking all night, and it was just like so freaking uncomfortable and difficult. I would not recommend starting with ayahuasca.
Yeah. I've had one of the most beautiful and loving experiences of my life with ayahuasca, and I also had the most treacherous, painful, 36 hours of of purging from it. You never know what you're going to get. I agree with you. It's kind of diving into the deep end. But what I take from is there's a great point that from here, and that it also connects to what you talked about on the sort of co-founder and couples counseling. It's important as a founder to understand yourself at a deep level. And to the extent that you can start that work early and incorporate that into how you lead, it's really essential. Because, and I guess the question to you is, like, when you look back at it now, from the work you've done on yourself through therapy, through ayahuasca and others, what role has turning inward and understanding and evaluated yourself played in shaping you as a leader and as an entrepreneur?
I think I've done a lot of work. I've worked with and still work with a personal and spiritual coach. I have a executive coach. I have 2 therapists, a grief counselor, or actually no, 2 grief counselors. So I've got a lot of support. I've worked with tons of, psychedelic facilitators, and the work is always ongoing. And so my mom makes the joke, if you're doing all this work, like, why is it never over? Why is it still going, Jess? Like, you should be fixed and done by now. And to which I say, yes, it is an ongoing journey. Yes, I'm not fixed, but my life is dramatically better today than it was before I started doing any of this work. Because in my early 20s, when I started my company, I had none of that support. I had Paul Graham, my fellow YC founders who were also struggling, starving entrepreneurs. And by doing the work, I had more fun at work. I was a better leader. I was told I became a more inspiring CEO. I was able to attract better talent and get better results in my business and make a ton more money along the way, and also remove limiting beliefs in my life, which held me back from getting to the next level. And these limiting beliefs, they're very deep and ingrained. And sometimes we don't even realize that we have a limiting belief that's holding us back. Like, oh man, like that seems just so ridiculous, right? But yeah, I mean, I still do the work because I believe that even though I've done a lot of it in the work context, now I want to do it more in my personal context, like with dating and relationships and my parents. And I don't know, like there's new territory to cover. And it's not all about just how to be a better CEO and make more money. Like that's great and all, and that's been the focus. But I think I've done a lot there, and I'm ready to try the next chapter.
Yeah. Turn the page on that one. Well, and you mentioned how that inner work helped you also not just transform yourself as a leader and pursuing your work with more fun and energy, but in viewing people through a different lens and being able to spot different types of talent. I think one of the most inspiring things that I saw that you wrote was how you were interviewing a candidate who revealed that he or she was currently in Alcoholics Anonymous. Can you tell me about that experience and what it taught you about the people that you work with?
Yeah, I have worked with many people who've confessed to me that they're struggling with a whole variety of things. A deep loss where someone died, a parent who's dying from, stage 4 cancer. They're struggling with the loss of their marriage and having to face the fact that they need help and they're going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And a lot of these people are going through these experiences in secret because they don't want their coworkers to judge them for it and to think less of them. And what I'm realizing is that so many people have a story like this, actually. It's really common, way more common than we realize. And they just don't want to share it with you or with anyone at work. And the more we just put it out there, if I say, hey, here's what I'm struggling with, here is what I'm going to get help for, then I'm inviting people to be more open and transparent about their struggles as well. And then we could put it all on the table and be like, okay, cool. Well, how do we support each other through this? How can I support you on, your sobriety journey? Because obviously there's so much more behind that led them to, using alcohol to numb pain from some trauma that they experienced, as an example. And it's hey, I have my own problems that are just manifesting in a different way. So the point is, I think as a leader, by being transparent and sharing our own struggles, we make it, but also sharing how we're getting help, that inspires your team members and colleagues to do the same for themselves and to make it feel safe for them to share what they're going through.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with it's well established at this point. The thing that is commonly underlying addiction is trauma and some sort of psychic pain that had been established through difficult experiences. And then the substance use is just a way to numb that psychological pain. And what I've learned over time, me having gone through an addiction recovery center myself, it's one of the first things I did after I left my positions in Silicon Valley, because I was, so overworked and stressed out on top of having a lot of childhood trauma underneath that, like you said, I didn't want to reveal to anybody. Those were the things that were fueling my tendency to just, use a substance or whatever I could to numb out at night so I could sleep so that I could wake up the next day and go to work, and that's an extremely common pattern. And I really like your point that it's not only that we all have our stories, this is a thread that connects us. But one of the things I've learned, especially in talking with folks like Dr. Michael Freeman, who's out of the psychiatry at UCSF, he's also a therapist and a coach to founders and entrepreneurs, is that there's a tendency or a much higher probability that for folks who have been traumatized, that it creates two sides of the same coin. One side is, sure, there may be this increased likelihood that somebody falls into patterns of addiction, but on the other side of that coin is that background can also shape them and give them their superpowers, where, for example, early childhood trauma in particular, it really rewires people's psychology and how they think about risk and reward and risk calculation itself. And it's one of the reasons why you find mental health prevalence or mental health differences at a much higher rate within the entrepreneur community. So I guess what I'm saying is that, and I'd be curious about your experience with some of these employees who had shared that they're working on their own stuff, is they come with the superpowers too. So, it's a pretty limited view when we look at somebody and say, well, maybe I should disqualify hiring this person because they're working through some real pain. because we may also be disqualifying somebody that comes with really amazing abilities and can add so much to the company, both personally and professionally. I don't know if what your experience was like with these folks, but I'd love to get your take on that.
I think you're absolutely right about that. With the struggle comes the superpowers. Like my LinkedIn post, I wrote about how the people I know who went through Alcoholics Anonymous, they're like very hardworking. They're like very disciplined. Like they're also, when they're able to share who they are at work, they're very loyal, they're very committed. And they're also really good at facilitating deep conversation and fostering a sense of community at work. Like all these pluses. Yeah. So I think you're right about that. And I think as entrepreneurs, we can reject our challenges and traumas and try to make ourselves seem super polished and perfect to ourselves, our workforce, the media. But actually, like, people relate more to your humanity. Like my media stories, like why I've been on the front page of so many, newspapers like Wall Street Journal several times, New York Times, Inc. magazine, is all because I just put out all of my stuff. Like all of my challenges, all the downs, some of the ups, but mostly the downs. Like, I think the media is actually tired of writing about entrepreneur success. And also just putting out the story narrative of how everything's great. It's just like also bullshit. It's just like not true. Like, it's just everyone I know who's been really successful has gone through so much awful stuff. It's funny. Last week I was hanging out with a bunch of CEOs I know, and I talked to some who I said, "Hey, you make it look really easy. No offense, but like, seems like you had it just as a piece of cake your entire life, and your career's been up and to the right. And I envy you that." And several of these people said, "Let me tell you what's really going on and how I really got here and all the crap I had to endure along the way." I was like, "Oh, but that wasn't in your public profile. Like that wasn't in your like Bloomberg feature and your Forbes article." So a lot of this is just done in private. We just don't know about it. And so my hope is that entrepreneurs, leaders are more transparent. I think it'll do a lot of good for the world.
Yeah. And to the investors that are listening, the dogma of, well, the best founders just find a way, they make it work, as if they don't have any cracks as well. It is total nonsense, because again, like that's part of the narrative I want to shift for investors to also understand, is that this heightened tendency for mental health differences to exist within entrepreneurs is not a weakness, because again, it comes with these superpowers. You get all of them together in this wonderful person. And to, sort of quit the dogma around, the best founders, they don't need a coach. They don't need a therapist. It's complete garbage.
It's total garbage. Actually, I think more of the investors I talk to now are encouraging their founders to get a great coach. A lot of people I co-invest with say, "Hey, Jess, could you recommend any of the coaches you worked with to some of my founders?" I think there's a turning point I'm starting to notice. Finally, I'm really excited about this. It's just beginning though. We're still in nascent stage.
Yeah. And it helps with like folks like Andy Dunn from Bonobos, coming out and writing his book about, being an entrepreneur with bipolar disorder and the significant challenges that poses. The more voices are speaking up, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
One last thing I'd love to cover with you, if it's okay, is I know that you've experienced a pretty significant loss in your life somewhat recently. And as you mentioned, you're already taking on the weight of the world when trying to build a company and responsible for payroll and all these people's livelihoods. But, life inevitably brings suffering to us in one form or another. And I'd love to hear about your experience of learning how to make the space to allow yourself to also deal with the suffering that life introduces, and sort of share your experience on realizing like, yeah, I can't just take 2 days off and get over this sort of thing. Like that it's okay to take the time that is necessary, especially when you're a leader, to heal and work through the things that life inevitably brings your way.
Yeah, happy to just discuss all of that. About 2 years ago, April of 2021, my boyfriend, who I was living with at the time, took his own life. So he died by suicide home. And obviously, it's an extremely traumatic, shocking, and sad event. And I was still running in an era at the time as CEO. I was working crazy hours up until that point. And it's kind of like driving a Ferrari at maximum speed and then slamming on the brakes. That was how my life felt, because I didn't go back to work for the rest of the year. I stopped checking my email. I completely tuned out. And I put together a little executive committee so I called my coach. I said, hey, what should I do? No way I could work. I'm just like too fucking depressed to go back to work. And my executive coach helped me get my leadership team together to basically run the company with me stepping away. And so I would have a weekly 30-minute check-in call with them just to like give them feedback on whatever they needed feedback on. Otherwise, I was going to take the rest of the time to do whatever I needed to take care of myself. And I emailed my investors. I told them, hey, here's what's going on. I had an autoresponder on. My admin, would tell people what was going on. I was like super transparent about it. And everyone in my life was extremely supportive, caring, and shockingly empathetic, actually. And yeah, I mean, that was just such a difficult time for me. I ended up hiring a replacement CEO for myself. I had a great headhunter find me someone who took over. And after that, I never went back to being an operating CEO. I mean, my last day running a company as CEO was basically the day my boyfriend died, which is kind of weird to think about. So like my personal life changed overnight. My work life also changed overnight. Like my entire life changed overnight, and I didn't plan it to be this way. And I didn't want it to go down this way, but I had no choice. Like these were the cards I was dealt. And I'm naturally a happy, optimistic person, as you can tell from our conversations. And this was just a whole new level of suck that I had never encountered before in my life. And I had to accept that all of the antics I have for like cheating towards immediate happiness and gratification and satisfaction, all of that was not going to work. I needed a new tool set. I needed to like rewire the whole operating system. And I brought on a PTSD trained therapist who I did a lot of EMDR work with. EMDR is a modality that I highly encourage you to Google up on if you're listening. Really helps with trauma and PTSD in particular. And I did a ton of psychedelic journeys. I worked with a grief counselor, someone who works only with patients who had a death in their family. I mean, so I was working with like 3 different counselors / therapists, and my executive coach and my spiritual coach. And so basically just making sense of what had happened became my full-time job. And I was still working out every day. I still went to the gym. I still called my trainer. And so I could talk about this for hours, but I think the point is I had to give myself that time and space to take care of myself. And I think thanks to my executive coach, I was able to be completely unapologetic about it and just say, here's what I'm going to do. I have to do it. I have no choice. If the company blows up because of it, so be it. It was just full surrender was the experience for me. And here I am 2 years later and still dealing with it, by the way. It is still not over. It is still not out of my head. This fucking terrible thing that happened over 2 years ago, I still think about every day. And it doesn't define me or my life experience, but it is kind of like a part of my existence that I've had to learn how to cope with it on a daily basis. And yeah, I mean, I still cry about it. I'm still upset about it. And I still have great days and I'm still laughing and happy and smiling all the time at the same time. Like both things can coexist. And before I didn't realize that. Before I thought, okay, you're either in happy mode or sad mode. Now I realize I could be like super, super depressed and super happy all within like a 20-minute time span. The variability in my mood is a lot higher now than it used to be. And I'm okay with it because there's no other way. And it's also kind of cool if you think about it.
Yeah, sort of the aftershocks of the experience and how that echo continues to influence us over time. And one of the things I take away from that story is, as the CEO, as the person in charge, you're going to commonly feel like you can't turn to anyone and you just got to shoulder the weight of the business. And that, in addition to quietly shouldering the weight of whatever else is going on in your life, you've got to not only, as soon as is practically feasible, cultivate those professional points of support around you with coaches and therapists and what have you, and bring those in as soon as you can. But to also realize, like, they're going to step up and help, and that you can let others know, like, hey, I need this help right now. I need to step away and I need a break, and that's an okay thing.
Yeah. I think I was just so shocked by how many of my loved ones said, Jess, this is absolutely terrible and I'm here with you the entire way. I was just totally astounded by it because that's when you really learn who your friends are. And the people who I thought were my real friends were actually my real friends. Like, shocker, right? Some people say, oh yeah, like who went through a loss, they say, oh, I thought I had close friends, but they weren't there for me during a tough time. I had the opposite experience. Everyone was there for me. And oh, by the way, because of how the death happened, like my home was a crime scene. I couldn't go back home. So I was literally homeless that day. I couldn't go back to work because I was too depressed. And obviously I was depressed. So like I felt like I had nothing left. I was on a trip. I was flying back to LA. So I had my suitcase, I had my laptop, and that's it. All my clothes back home were destroyed in the accident. It's a longer story, but let's just say all my belongings were literally just on me at the moment that I found out that he had died. And I had a half dozen friends who immediately said, you're not just welcome to move in with me, you're encouraged to move in with me, stay as long as you need. And so I bummed around. I mean, I had 3 different friends I lived with in LA. I went to Hawaii and spent 2 months with my friend Tracy Lawrence in Hawaii, and she nursed me back to health. And then one day I said, you know what? I'm ready to get my own place again. And then one day I said, you know what? I'm ready to go back to work again. And it's just when I knew I was ready, I knew, and it was a very visceral experience. It's like every cell in my body said, Jess, it's time for the next chapter. Like, you are well enough now to go back to crush it at work. But you're going to do it in a different way. You're not going to be CEO this time. You're going to do something completely different. And so that's what led me to working on Astonishing Labs with the brilliant scientist Michael Levin and Adam Goldstein, who was in my YC batch with me. And that company's on fire. Company's, worth also, in the 9-figure range today. And then I have my legal company that's also a 9-figure business. So, yeah, it's really cool to have these successes and meanwhile not be doing it the way I did in Daenerys, which was just painful and lots of suffering and grueling. I was just like, I did it in a completely new and different way and a lot easier of a way. And while dealing with my grief and loss and being really sad, it's been a very eventful year and change since I went back to work.
Yeah. I mean, it's an incredible story, just altogether. And I especially love just how, you'd wrote it's about post traumatic growth, not post traumatic stress. There comes this point where you've got to sort of make a shift on that as well and take those difficult experiences and apply them to your life moving forward and approach things in a different way. And I think that's a really powerful message. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. I really think it's the only way. Because again, what are the two choices? Embrace push traumatic growth and then therefore get push traumatic growth, or reject it and just say, woe is me. This is just categorically terrible. And like, I'm just going to be mopey and depressed about it and never get better. Like, that's not an option. That's a terrible fucking option. And also, if you lost someone, would they want that for you? I don't think so. They would want to see you go through your healing journey and come out on the other side, leaving with more empathy, more day-to-day gratitude. Maybe you're a softer, more compassionate leader as a result. Maybe you're more authentic. Maybe you learn how to ask for help. Maybe you know how to support other people going through loss better now because of this. Like, there are so many things that are on the push traumatic growth list that are things you could lead with that I know Travis would want me to say I got this process. So
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Thank you, Jess.
yeah, thank you.
Well, and I guess, on that note, like, we've covered this huge journey of yours, and to tie things up, if there's something like a comment or a message that you want to leave for the entrepreneurs who are going to be listening to this as it relates to, sure, you've got this part of you that's building something and you want it to succeed, but that's happening within this broader tapestry of your life. Like, from all of the hardships you've been through personally and professionally, if there's sort of a message that you wanted to leave with today's entrepreneurs, what would that be?
I think the message I would want to leave people with is all of these difficult experiences that we go through, instead of resenting them, the sooner we can embrace them and use them to fuel us, the more we're going to get out of our journeys. And so, a saying I love, pain is a portal. Pain is also power. Suffering is terrible, but pain, instead of rejecting pain, if we could use it as a way to tell ourselves that we need to do something different. We need to approach life in a different way. We need to approach our work in a different way. And listening to that message and doing some of that deep work with your coach and with your therapist or with your psychedelic facilitator to investigate that question, then I think that you're going to see like better results on the other side. And I know I have, and I know I'm still going through that. But yeah, I actually keep a running list of like all of the big questions in my life that I don't feel like I've fully figured out. And I'm trying to share them with as many people as possible so that I could get more perspective. One more thing I want to leave people with. So after Travis passed away, I had two thoughts. One is, wow, I can't believe this fucking happened to me. Like, what the fuck? So a lot of shock and also like the initial woe is me attitude. But the next thought was, all right, this is going to be terrible. And 5 or 10 years from now, this is going to define my growth and my development over the next few years. And I'm going to look back at this as the pivotal inflection point in my life that sets me on a new path And I have no idea what that's going to look like right now because I'm fucking homeless and jobless and can't do anything. I can't even fucking get out of bed right now. Okay. But 10 years from now, I'm going to back at this like really terrible moment and see how far I've come. And I just had that knowing, that intuitive sense. And so I think if anyone's going through a really tough time, thinking about it 10 years out is actually, I think, really helpful.
Yeah, as Sigmund Freud once said, one day in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. And that's been my experience as well. So, well, thank you, Jess. I really appreciate it. All the openness and honesty. And I think this conversation is going to resonate and help a lot of folks. So thank you for spending the time to tell your story and to answer my questions.
Yes. Thank you for having this conversation with me. This is great.